The government has stumbled into a crisis that is at once ethical, operational and brutally political. The immediate cause is well known, the publication of Peter Mandelson's emails to Jeffrey Epstein, revealing an intimacy of tone and advocacy that is impossible to square with public standards in 2025. Bloomberg put the hard evidence on the table, including the timeline of its 2,000-word memo to Mandelson on Monday afternoon that set the chain in motion. Downing Street's formal line is that the Prime Minister only saw the detailed emails on Wednesday afternoon and sacked Mandelson on Thursday. That sequence is confirmed by the government's own notice withdrawal of the ambassador, and yet this sits alongside reporting that officials in the Foreign Office and Number 10 were aware of the emails earlier in the week and that ministers were being briefed even as the Prime Minister told the Commons that he had confidence in his envoy. On the record, the Skills Minister Jackie Smith said Starmer himself didn't see the detail until after PMQs, and those two realities can both be true and still be politically lethal. The damage is not confined to optics, it eats into the government's central claim to restore standards. If your lodestar is propriety, you cannot afford equivocation when evidence moves from rumour to documentation, and the hard fact is the evidence was moving on Tuesday and the Foreign Office opened inquiries that day. Bloomberg had put its dossier to Mandelson. At minimum, the system knew enough to trigger extreme caution, yet at Wednesday lunchtime, the Prime Minister chose to express confidence. That is the moment that now haunts him. Since then, three overlapping narratives have fused. First, the ethics narrative. Victims, families and campaigners have condemned the appointment and the hesitation in removing Mandelson. Second, the competence narrative. Who knew what, when, and why? Did the words at the dispatch box lag the facts in Whitehall? And third, the authority narrative. The sense among Labour MPs that Number 10 is reactive, not driving events. Put bluntly, if you propose to clean up public life, you cannot afford a week that looks like this. The ethics point is straightforward. The competence point points to progress and to process, but the authority point now has a name. It's Morgan McSweeney. In any serious operation, the Chief of Staff is the Prime Minister's firewall, radar and brake pedal. If warnings were watered down, if the vetting assessment was softened before it reached the Prime Minister, or if political risk was gamed out and misscored, accountability must land somewhere. And that somewhere is rarely a committee, it is almost always the Chief of Staff. Even sympathetic coverage that defended Mandelson's singular talents has underlined that McSweeney drove the original appointment is now the lightning rod for the fallout. Meanwhile, the political weather has darkened. The Guardian's weekend-long read did not invent the phrase "operation to dethrone the Prime Minister," but it captured a real mood. Plotting conversations have moved from if to how. The detail matters less than the trajectory. If a party perceives its leader as serially unlucky, a single week can harden into a story about competence that is very hard to break. Add a deputy leadership contest, a popular mayor with national name recognition circling the runway and the prospect of bruising local and devolved elections next May, and the chill becomes structural and impossible to ignore. On the right, critics have moved from mockery to obituary. Andrew Neil argues that it is already terminal for Starmer. You do not have to accept the verdict to see its potency. A government with a large majority can still lose command if its internal coalition loses faith. Narratives harden first inside Westminster tea rooms, then in headlines, then in the public mind, and at each stage the cost of recovery rises. So, what exactly is the choice? It's not truly between truth and spin, nor between contrition and defiance. It is between retaining a Chief of Staff who is now the proxy for a week of misjudgment, or cutting him loose to demonstrate that standards have operational consequence. If McSweeney stays, every interview, every lecture, every hostile question will ask, why was he protected? If he goes, the Prime Minister can say with credibility, I meant what I said about standards, and I have enforced them at the top table. So here are the arguments on both sides. Keep McSweeney and you preserve continuity, data and the muscle memory of a team that delivered a landslide. The risk is that continuity looks like denial. You cannot sell renewal with the same faces holding the same levers after a breakdown of this kind. Moreover, it invites an endless archaeology of what he knew when he knew it, and whether he shaded the truth in internal advice. That keeps the story alive through conference and into the budget. It also makes every further misstep, however minor, proof of a broken machine. Remove McSweeney and you buy three things. First, a punctuation mark. Stories need endings. A resignation provides one. Second, a reset mandate. You can restructure number 10. Elevate a political secretary with better antenna. Employ the cabinet secretary to stiffen the ethics spine in appointments. Third, political space. Sacking an ally is painful, but it's also an assertion of agency. It shows the Prime Minister is not captive to anyone's strategy but his own. The price is high. You lose a strategist who knows your mind and your map, but you keep the price of keeping him may now be higher. And some say this is scapegoating or that it rewards a hostile press. That is to misread the moment. The case for change is not tabloid-driven, it is internal trust. MPs need to believe that the advice pipeline to the Prime Minister is rigorous, unvarnished and fearless. Vetting judgments must travel unfiltered. When the facts worsen, the advice must darken, not brighten. If that chain failed at the top of number 10, it must be visibly repaired at the same level. There is also the parliamentary dimension. The Conservative Party is pressing for disclosure of the Mandelson Epstein files and for Starmer and McSweeney to give evidence. Whether or not that happens, the Labour benchers will be asked why their leader defended Mandelson at noon on Wednesday and sacked him before dawn on Friday, if nothing truly new emerged in between. The neatest answer is that the system failed the Prime Minister on Tuesday and Wednesday, and that he has now fixed that system. That answer requires a personnel decision. Zoom out, and the government was already fighting on 3 fronts: cost of living, public service, performance, and a Reform UK insurgency that thrives on narratives of elite hypocrisy. The Unite the Kingdom march, with its numbers, its flags, its anger, set the backdrop, and in that context, the Mandelson episode is not just a scandal, it's an accelerant on a dry field. The fastest way to starve the fire is to isolate the oxygen source, process failure, at the top of number 10. So what should happen next? Somebody said I offer 5 points. I do now. That's a conscious decision, but here are 4. First, radical transparency. Publish the appointment timeline, the vetting schema, and a redacted version of the advice flown around Monday to Thursday last week. Let the facts close the gaps. Pair that with a short statement in the House that centres the victims, not the institutions. The Foreign Office note did the minimum. The Prime Minister needs to do the maximum. Second, we need to restructure, create a standing standards and appointments panel inside number 10 with clear authority to hold senior nominations where reputational risk rises above threshold. Require the Chief of Staff, any Chief of Staff, to certify in writing that the Prime Minister has been shown the unredacted worst case material before sign-off, with the Cabinet Secretary co-signing. Third point, reset the political argument. Use conference to announce a narrow set of delivery guarantees that touch daily life within 6 months. A clean NHS backlog metric, a visible police presence metric, and a cost of living intervention funded by a limited, transparent tax metric. If your weakness is judgment, your antidote is plain competence. The singular talents argument will not save you, only results will. Fourthly, draw a bright moral line. The Prime Minister should state plainly that anyone who knowingly minimised the gravity of Epstein's crimes or the proximity of public servants to him cannot serve. That applies to advisers as much as to diplomats. It is both right and politically necessary. Finally, the politics. Some commentators say he's done. I don't. British politics moves fast, then denies it ever moved at all. But there are movements and moments where the system demands a visible sacrifice to prove the words carry weight. This is one of those moments. And if Morgan McSweeney resigns or is moved, the Prime Minister regains agency. If he stays, the story stays, the knives are out. The choice is brutal but clear. It's not just about blame, it's about rebuilding the confidence of MPs and the public that the advice hitting the Prime Minister's desk is complete, candid and cold. If the Prime Minister wants to keep his project alive, he must change his team at the top. Not because a newspaper said so, but because the government is a moral practice as well as a managerial one. Accountability is how you tell the country you meant every word.